That's quite deep. We're signposting people through the internet.
Yeah, that's a really good, I like that.
I love it.
So on social, impressions are up 20% year on year, but click-through rate is down by 30% year on year. So people are engaging less. Why do you think that is from a designer's perspective?
Well, I think generally there are more adverts than there probably have been in previous years. I think people are spending more time on the internet and seeing more of those ads. So if anything, people are probably just being like desensitized to them. But I think from a design perspective, because there are so many adverts out there, it's becoming increasingly competitive, and people are possibly relying more on templates, which mean a lot of the designs are starting to look the same. Yeah. But also people are forgetting some core fundamentals within design to try and compete for this space, and forgetting some really basic rules that will ultimately help them cut through the noise and speak to their audience in a much better way.
Yeah, I definitely agree about it becoming more templated, and I think competition is on the rise, and paid advertising in general is becoming a lot more expensive. More people are running paid adverts. And I remember reading a stat on Hootsuite that said that people gauge a response, a negative emotional response to ads within a second of looking at them. So they know straight away whether, what you're promoting is for them or not. And that's a really short period of time to create a first impression. And I think there are a lot of different reasons that can cause a bad first impression.
What do you think those are?
So I think a lot of people make the common mistake of trying to include too much copy, too much text within ads, and not necessarily just in captions, but in the imagery themselves, which I think is a bit of a cardinal sin, as having an image is an option to visually communicate what your message is, what you're promoting, what your service or product is. So by using that solely just to host more copy, I think is a bit of a missed opportunity. And I think, sorry, go on.
No, I totally agree. I think that people are trying to do too much, and it's great to have imagery, but it's also great to have text. And I think people try and do both and then end up doing it really badly. There are, for Instagram, for example, there used to just be images all over the place, but at the moment, there seems to be an increase on people doing very heavy text posts, and that's great. But where the problem lies is when people try and have text and image, and they end up competing with each other, and people can't clearly see the image, but then they also can't clearly see the text. So less is more, really. You need to strip it back and choose either really strong imagery or really strong messaging, and not both.
Yeah, I think the key point there is they need to be complementary. So Facebook used to have a restriction on ads where you could only have 20% of the image could show text, and they removed that, despite the fact that they still recommend only having 20% text in images, because from what Facebook have said, you see better performance that way. And that potentially could lend itself to why people are engaging less, 30% less year on year with social posts.
Why do you think they moved the restriction?
Probably primarily to increase the amount of ads that are running and gain more revenue through advertisers. I know it was a common problem for advertisers that they ran into when creating social ads, that Facebook wouldn't run them because there was too much text in them. So I think that was probably what motivated it. But I think the theory behind it kind of holds true. In general, people engage more with video now than they did before. More video is shown in social feeds than ever before. So I think by only showing copy within an image area, or like what you said, also showing copy over imagery as well, where you're potentially complicating what you're trying to communicate, you're losing out on a good opportunity for visual storytelling.
Do you think that 20% rule would apply across all social channels, or just Facebook?
I think it really depends. So, I mean, if you're advertising or promoting across a broad range of social media, for example, like Pinterest, that's almost completely image-based. Same with Instagram, is mostly image-based. I think that's probably an opportunity to I'd argue, remove the majority of copy, if not all, from images. I think there's something to be said with being more brave with your choice of images and being confident in knowing that it's effectively communicating what you're trying to promote. But I don't know, from a design perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
I think if you're going to be using images and text, it's just really important to have a clear hierarchy. So when people are skimming things, especially ads, like you said, people see them for such a short time and they need to make that decision really quickly. So whatever the message is you're trying to communicate, you need to make that as easy as possible for your audience to digest as quickly as possible. So there are some really quick things you can do, like hierarchy in terms of the size of your text. So you'd obviously want your core USP or the main important part to be massive. But what people often do is they'll try and make everything big and try and just shout the whole message. You don't need to do that. You can break it down really easily and have your primary message is really large, your secondary message is slightly smaller, T's and C's is really small, and then your call to action needs to be clear on there as well. What you don't need to do is have everything the same size. It's not how you grab attention. A really good example of that as well is capitalization of text. People will think that to shout loud is to literally make it look like you're shouting loud, and having everything in capitals is actually one of the worst things you can do for people to read that text. If you think of road signs, that's something that people need to grab really quickly and read it really easily. No road signs are all in capitals because it's not how people read text. People read it best when they can see the ascenders and the descenders that go up and down and look at the actual shape and the form of the letters. When you capitalize it, you're then putting it into a massive block and people can't distinguish the letters and they can't read it as quickly. So hierarchy, don't capitalize.
That's a really interesting analogy, actually, with road signs, because they only show you the most important vital information. They're not putting large amount of text, right? It's something that you're going to glance at and then move past. And in a lot of cases, that's what social media is. People glance at an image, a post, and they move on quite quickly.
That's quite deep. We're signposting people through the internet.
Yeah, that's a really good. I
love it.
So, like, I think when we're thinking about what imagery, what graphics we're gonna show on social media, less is more, right? Like, we want the essential information, and then there are opportunities for people to click and find out more information by reading the caption area, clicking onto a website. That's their opportunity to learn more. But
absolutely,
the idea is you want to stop them from scrolling and read what it is you've got to say, and then if they're interested, they'll commit.
And what's your stance on captions? So if we're saying less is more and we just have a really clean image with a really nice statement on it, find out more in the caption, how much do you think you can put in the caption? Would you recommend putting a lot, or would you try and navigate them off onto the website or the promotional area?
I don't think there's any concrete information out there from an advertiser's perspective, but my personal opinion is always less is more. I think if you can hook someone in one or two concise, slick sentences and they're interested, they'll make that commitment to click on the post to read more, or read a blog, visit a website, engage with your brand, rather than, I think, complicating anything and including too much copy. I think that's what puts people off, and that's what I personally find easy to scroll past on social media is if there's a wall of copy or if there's loads of text on top of an image, I won't stop and read it. I'll just move on.
No, that's true. But on the other hand, there has been an increase in the amount of text that has been used on images. As we spoke about with the 20% rule being removed, it's because a lot of people do want to put longer form text, and especially on Instagram, it used to just be imagery, whereas now people are offering a lot of value and a lot of content in scrollable carousels that do have quite a lot of text on them. How do you think they perform in terms of adverts?
In terms of adverts, again, I don't think there's anything conclusive to say they perform better. I do think what is powerful about that is kind of diversifying your content and making sure that on whether it's paid or organic, you're not posting the same thing, or your posts don't all look exactly the same. Because I think by switching it up, that's what's going to, again, probably stop people from just immediately scrolling past. But I do like the idea of, for example, blogs. If you've got a blog that's 5 tips to XYZ, putting out some of those key points into a carousel or something and visually breaking up those components might incentivize people to engage more.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just about changing up your content and not always just being, images and not just being text. It's about having a good balance between the two, for sure.
And I think if it gets to the point where you are looking to include a lot of copy or a lot of text in your posts, I think that's an opportunity to better distill what you're trying to communicate to that user to make it easy for them to consume online. Because if they don't get it quickly, they will move on.
100%.
And I think video is a really powerful way of doing that, where the amount of information you could distill in one image versus a video is not comparable. So I think, and we're seeing a lot of brands, a lot more people in general utilizing video, especially on Instagram. Obviously the rise of TikTok, YouTube, and I think that's something that will probably continue into the future.
It doesn't even have to be really complex video. There are a lot of really simple ads I saw on the other day that just said, "We are hiring," and then the hiring in the background was almost like a GIF, and it had lots of different images within the negative space of the hiring on this black image, and it was so impactful rather than just having a still image, really. So I think people are being more creative in the way they deliver their adverts, and that was a sponsored post, but it had a lot of engagement on it. If it was a still, probably less so. Yeah. I don't think it has to be. But again, they didn't say what the job was that they were hiring. I don't even know what company it was from, really. So might not have actually been the best example of an ad, but it did get a lot of engagement because it was so visual and it really stood out from the crowd. I think you're right in what you're saying about when you have an advert and you need to put a lot in, always go back to that core higher purpose of what the message is you're trying to get across. You don't need to put in everything. So many people try and do that and just end up having like passages and passages on their ads, and people aren't there to read it. You're trying to attract them, not the other way around. So
yeah, exactly. I think it's putting the user at the kind of center of the story. They're the protagonist of their story, and whether it's your copy or your visuals, it needs to be focused on them and not the brand, not yourself. If you're promoting yourself and you're just talking about yourself, no one's going to take notice. It has to be about the user, and I think there's a lot to be said about tailoring it to, if you know your audience, your demographic, and you've got a strong persona, you'll know how they like to communicate and how they communicate with other people. And that's a really important consideration in both writing copy for adverts and I think probably design as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might be slightly off piece, but I saw an amazing blog the other day that was talking about how Netflix will tailor their like cards for, so say, Stranger Things. It will show how if you like 80s movies, it will show you that in a really 80s style. But then if you're more into horror, it had it in like a really darker form. And it's the same with adverts. Yeah. I mean, that is what Netflix are doing. So they've got this one program, but they can tailor almost the title cards to different audiences to see the different sides of Stranger Things, although it's just one program. When you do adverts, if you're a company, but you target old people, young people, students, whatever, you need to show your brand in a slightly different way to show how you appeal to those different audiences. Can't just be one size fits all.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So what do you think your key takeaways would be?
My key takeaways would definitely be, do not capitalize your text. Always have a strong hierarchy, and also less is more. So imagery or text, you can do both, but you really have to think about the hierarchy and make sure they're not fighting with each other. Yeah. What would yours be?
So mine would be having one clear, concise message for the ad and a clear call to action to go along with that. So don't confuse your messaging with too many different services or products. Keep it simple and focused on one objective. The next would be to use the caption area of social media for copy and to use the accompanying area for images and video for visual storytelling. That's your opportunity to stop someone from scrolling and impress them. And I think including too much copy on there is not going to do that. And then Lastly, just utilize more video. It's going to kind of break up, I think, the monotony of doing just a lot of static image-based posts. And again, I think that's what's going to stop people from scrolling.